I want to know about Cusick Media. Will you tell me where that started?
Totally, yeah. And so I guess it kind of interweaves with my story. Try to keep it tight, but man, I had no idea I wanted to get into a creative world. When I grew up, I drew a lot, but honestly didn't have a lot of other mediums in which I could create. I wasn't the kid that had the discipline to sit and learn guitar, or any of those things that, like, looking back, I wish I would have just like made myself do. Um, but dude, I would say I was a creative kid, but didn't really have a lot of outlets. I played sports growing up, played football, thought I was going to be an NFL quarterback, and unfortunately stopped growing in seventh grade. And so that stunted my opportunity a good bit. But man, in high school, thought I was going to play football. And then by the time senior year came around, I realized I wasn't going to be an NFL athlete. And at that point, I was just like, man, I think I'm just want to go to college. And so I went to Western Kentucky University. And when I went there, I actually became a Christian right before I went to college. And so in that process, went to college. When I'm not very good at, like, just kind of jumping into anything. Either like I'm super obsessed or I don't care at all. And Christianity was also that way. And so I watched like a sermon every single day of the week. And um, throughout all that, really, I think the Lord kind of convicted my heart to work in vocational ministry. And so at WKU, did a communication major with a minor in philosophy. And in that time, started working at a church 20 hours a week, was being mentored by the college pastor, ended up working in college ministry. And during one of the summers, living in Bowling Green, they asked me to stay and just see what ministry looked like over the course of a summer. And so I stayed, and it was abundantly boring. Bowling Green is an awesome town. I really do love it, and it's incredible for college. But when all your friends leave and go home and you're just sitting there by yourself, you're like, ah, okay, well, what do I do? And so in that time is when I actually picked up the camera that my mom took like high school football pictures of me of. And so got that camera, came back to Bowling Green, and again with that like obsession, just like went all in. Fell in love with YouTube, um, tutorials, and all of those kind of things to learn camera. But also at the same time, I was really into a EDM band called the Chainsmokers. And dude, back in like 2015, 16, 17, 18, they were very progressive when it came to creating content on tour and doing recaps. There was a content guy named Roy Kramer who actually tours with Justin Bieber now. It was like a huge inspiration to me at the time. And so I picked up a camera, started making like little like recap videos with buddies, and just like hanging out, whether we'd go down to Nashville for 4th of July or just silly stuff. And a buddy of mine was actually on a tour with a country artist, and that country artist had just had his first number one in country radio, got a tour bus. My buddy was just like, hey, dude, you want to come on tour? And I was just like, well, that sounds fun. Why not? And so took my camera, went on a tour run for a weekend, and looking back, content was garbage, but the artist loved it at the time. And I remember he handed me like $200 in cash from merch that he made. And I just thought I was like, I went from poor, skipped rich, went straight to wealthy. I mean, that's the most money I'd ever seen. And it was just, it was fun, be creating like that, creating with artists and creating with other creative people. And so sporadically, so that happened like sophomore, junior year. And then sporadically after that, leading up to my senior year, would hop on a tour every once in a while. But by the time my senior year came around, I had a lot of life going on. I got married going to my senior year to my wife. Again, the story's always like she was way out of my league, had to lock her down before she really understood the gap between us. I call her my little child bride because she was 20 and I was 21. And so we had to go to our honeymoon in Mexico so that we could have some margaritas, because legal. But yeah, dude. And so in that season, ended up my senior year, I was married, was doing like a normal class load on campus, but just skipping Thursday, Friday class so I could tour 3 weekends out of the month with a couple different country artists. Was actually taking 6 hours of seminary to kind of get ahead of the curve on that front as well. And yeah, I was working also 20 hours a week at the church. And so to say I was doing them poorly would be like the understatement of the year. I was garbage at everything that I was so spread thin.
Of course.
And just kind of came to a point where it was just like, I was exhausted, not really stoked about what all I was making. And I was watching a TV show called Parks and Rec. Very silly sitcom, but a character named Ron Swanson said, don't half-ass two things, whole-ass one thing. And I just think the Lord used that as a dagger in my heart to like kind of almost humble me and sit me down and be like, hey, buddy, let's really figure this out. So I spent like 2 weeks praying, fasting, talking to mentors. And to my surprise, felt a lot of clarity going into the creative route. I thought I would feel a lot of conviction about like not working in vocational ministry or X, Y, and Z, but it was just abundantly clear that the Lord was opening doors in the creative world, and felt a lot of peace about going over there. So all that to lead to my wife and I graduate from college in 2019. We take a year in Bowling Green before we do any sort of moves or anything like that. I was kind of getting tired of tour work. I think the guys who can tour consistently are incredible. I just really struggled with having to leave my family every weekend to provide for it, and just kind of wanted to find a way to where I didn't have to always be on the road. Don't get me wrong, every once in a while popping on a run, it's a blast and
Sure.
getting that experience of touring. But I just really wanted to figure out a way for myself to be able to kind of create for myself a lifestyle where I could be home a little bit more. And this whole thing called COVID really expedited my process pretty good. We were going to do a 2 week run from Tacoma to LA, all arena shows, would have been incredible. But I got a call from the tour manager just saying, "Hey, dude, hold off on packing your bags. There's this thing called COVID that popped up that kind of changed some things." 3 hours later, entire year's worth of shows were canceled. I'm like, all right,
Yeah.
well, God, I asked you to help me get off the road, and that was a quite quick process.
Right.
So sorry about that. I don't know if COVID was my fault, but maybe. And so in that season, dude, just kind of had to like reset and figure things out. My wife actually got an occupational therapy program for her doctorate down at Belmont, and so that was our official reason to get down to Nashville. And dude, landed here, knew almost no one other than like the one or two tour camps that I was close to. And so I just started like DMing a bunch of people. Honestly, like not even a lot of artists, but a lot of creative people that I thought were really interesting, just to connect, just to chat, because I was so out of the circle and didn't really know anybody or how to get plugged in this town. And so it was a bunch of DMs. I would say like 5% of the people that I DM'd actually hit me back, which was really great ratio. It was a lot of just like, "Hey, dude, I don't know you. There's a pandemic. We're not getting coffee." I'm like, "All right, cool. Have a good one." But yeah, so in that season, met a lot of incredible creatives. And then when COVID restrictions started lifting a little bit at the back end of 2020, I was doing behind the scenes for a music video for an artist named Mitchell Tenpenny. And we were just cutting up, and he had told me he had a song called Bucket List coming out the top of 2021. And I was just being dumb. And I was just like, "Hey, dude, like, what if we just took all the label's money and did our own bucket list?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Yeah, okay."
Oh, so cool.
And so that was my first music video.
Okay.
So we flew out to Arizona, did like 4 or 5 days, Grand Canyon, Monument Valley, Lake Powell, just a genuinely just like a bucket list trip. It was me, his now wife, and his manager with Mitchell. So the four of us just had a ball, and it just felt so God ordained, but also just like such a mess at the same time. I had never directed anything before, never produced anything before, DP'd, edited, colored, never gotten permits, but I was getting permits from the national government, which is the hardest thing in the
So
entire
cool,
world.
man.
But yeah, dude, so that came out at the top of 2021. And then in July that year is when I hired my first employee. So that was kind of what I would say is the genesis of Cusick Media.
Okay.
I have always wanted to be a part of something bigger than myself. But I'm also pretty stubborn and don't love being told what to do by people.
Right.
And so the duality of that looked like me making my own production company.
Right.
And so to expedite the last few years, I guess that was July of 21. Now we're in, dude, almost July of 25, which is nuts. Yeah, dude, I've just been really blessed with an incredible team. Right now, we're sitting at me as kind of director, photographer, I guess like executive producer on my team. And then we've got a full-time producer named Brecken. She's a rock star. And then a full-time editor named Alex, and she's incredible. And so we exist as kind of this trio to where I kind of come in with a lot of kind of creative and a little bit of kind of directorial execution. Brecken's kind of our organizational head, and Alex kind of cleans everything up in post for us. And so we're able to kind of scale up and scale down and work a lot of different ways. And I would say Cusick Media, when it comes to the product that we create, I think for 5 years, it was pretty, between even me starting till I would say about early last year, was pretty exclusively music.
Okay.
We did music videos, acoustic videos, lyric videos, any sort of content that you can think of within the music industry. And then eventually doing a lot of these like vertical short form shoots, all these kind of things. And so we were like all in on that, had a lot of incredible relationships with Universal and Sony and Big Loud and Big Machine and all of these different ones. But it was really top of last year where I saw like a big shift in the kind of music industry budget wise, and just not really prioritizing content and stuff like that we were in. And crew rates were getting higher.
Yeah.
Rates for shoots were getting lower. And so we were just really getting squeezed in the middle. And so really just started pivoting. Now we're doing a lot more commercial work. It was a slow grind to get over there, but recently I've been able to work with some incredible brands like Asus. We went over
So cool.
to Milan earlier this year and did a shoot for the laptop launch that they just had, and got to do some small stuff with Nike and Hoka and Tracksmith and some really incredible brands that, I mean, I just still doesn't feel real that we work with.
So
But
cool.
yeah, that was long story long.
Now's the time to talk, dude.
Yeah.
There's obviously a big jump going from being a director on your own to then running a company. Was that a tough transition?
Um, I will say my team's had a lot of patience for me. I think I've really walked into everything pretty open handed,
Yeah.
with a lot of just like clear transparency. Hey, a lot of these decisions that I'm making are the first time I'm going to do this. So give me a little grace and just tell me if you think it should be different.
Yeah.
I
Incredible.
think running a business is something that I find a lot of fun in. I think some people have asked me, like, because I remember I was, I think 23, and I hired my first employee and he was like 30, and people are like, is that weird? I'm like, no, both my dad was a contractor and my mom was a hairdresser. And so like, it was one of those, and they never had that consistent paycheck. And so I think it was just always one of those things where in my brain, I was like, yeah, why not?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Was that ever a dream of yours to run a business, or did you have any preparation at all for that?
I think it was subconscious preparation.
Okay.
I think for me, it was never like I didn't take a single business class in college other than one that was required.
Yeah.
Or I remember in high school, there was a photography class that was offered that I took my senior year. In the first week, the teacher only did photography history. And I was just like, this is stupid. I'm not going to sit through an entire like semester worth of class doing photography and just sitting in a desk. And so I dropped out of that class, did an extra study hall instead. And then it was funny learning later that he did that every year to basically weed out anybody who didn't actually want to be a part of the class. And it worked really good for me.
Yeah.
But it's my job now.
Yeah. Right.
So I would say like no proper preparation. When
Okay.
I was going into college, I really didn't know what I was going to do. And I talked about like being in business one day. But to be honest with you, I didn't know what that meant at all
Totally.
either. So it was very just like, hey, this feels like the door that got open for me. I'm just going to take the next step and then just figure it out as it goes.
I completely understand this, having shifted more from play or music industry into entrepreneurship. I know that the learning curve for that is steep. And at least for me, it felt like I don't even know what question to ask to get the answer I need.
Absolutely. I think for what I lack in like pure talent, I think I make up for in just like I want to say this loosely, like humility, and not humility and oh man, he's so humble. It's like I'll ask the question. I will look stupid to try to find the answer. And so I think for me, like a big part of it's just like persistence in trying to learn.
Yeah.
I feel like that obsession kind of floats into different categories in my life, and I think just like seeking out mentors, seeking out people who have done it before, and just not being afraid to ask the question. It was like, hey, how did you do this? Because this is coming up and I don't know and I don't want to make the mistake. And so whether that's an in-person mentorship or advisor, or if that is genuinely just spending absurd amount of hours on YouTube trying to find
Right.
answers, my career has been a lot of saying yes and then figuring it out.
Okay.
It's like, can you do this? Oh, totally. I feel so confident. All right, Google, God help me.
Totally.
So I would say it's a very kind of duality of just like being almost dumb enough to think that you can do it, and then having the grit to like go and figure it out so that you don't say you can do it and then you're an idiot on set
Right.
and really let a client down.
We were just talking about this, but I think it was Tip that was saying this a couple months ago. How important a healthy dose of delusion is when starting something.
Dude, it's a superpower, I think. And especially with like building this production company, like learning all of the hoops that I have to jump through and the hardships. Like looking back now, like the question is like, would you do it again? I think it's just like, God, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I know right then, like I had no idea all the hardships that I have to go through. So I was
Yes.
like, absolutely, I can do this.
Yep.
And so I think when going into starting something, having that just like ignorance, delusion, whatever verbiage it is, it's just like, dude, try it. I think that's a gift that young people have, is just like, well, why not? You know?
The stakes are relatively low compared to what they're going to be later in life. Talk to me about managing a team and what that looks like.
I think it's a really fun thing, especially if you have the right people. I've been incredibly blessed over the years to have awesome, awesome team members that have stayed with me for a long time or stayed with me for a season at a time. But I think when you have a team that you manage, the biggest part is like you have to actually care about them. I think that's been my key to success. Maybe the verbiage. I think it's just like actually caring. Like, hey, they have something going on in their personal life. Ask and care. Ask them about what goals they have. Where do they want to be? Not just molding them into this exact character that you want. Don't get me wrong. Having employees, it's about business. It's about like them performing and being able to do specific tasks so that the company can grow or do whatever you deem as success. But at the same time, it's just like finding a deep care and interest in their lives, and being able to show up for them when they need it. And then again, like it's just about having an open dialogue. I think that's been the biggest part for me in my career, has been just like open transparency, whether it's from me letting them know what I have going on in my life and being open to say, hey, I need you guys to step up because I've got these things going on. Or it's, hey, if I'm doing something that needs to be corrected, I want you to feel like you can have the candor and like us have an open enough relationship to where you can say, hey, Tristan, I know you say you want to do this, but you've been doing this, and these things don't align. Can't, like, what's going on? And it'll just like humble me really well, and I'll be like, oh frick, great call out. Thank you for saying that. I needed to be reminded, and then just being like open to feedback like that.
I have so much admiration for that. That is so difficult to do, especially when you're supposed to be the one who's responsible to be able to say, you're totally right. We can do this more efficiently or we can do this differently is not easy to do at all.
Well, this is not like I will say this is a newer revelation for me.
Of
This is much more
course.
the last year or so that
Yeah,
the team has,
of course.
because I will say like the learning curve was big for me.
Yeah.
Early on, I think because I was a one man show, it was very much kind of helicopter parent on a lot of jobs or different stuff like that, and learning to like let the team like go, and like if they fail, okay, cool, like let's rally, let's fix it, and let's do it better next time. I think it's just been this like over the course of time learning, hey, I hired you because I think you're good and you're talented and you're capable and you're responsible. Let me trust you enough so that like you can go out and do it without me, because ultimately I think for a long time, instead of building Cusick Media, I was building Tristan and Friends, if that makes any sense.
Yes, it
Like
does.
it was this almost like to the world branding thing that I was building, where it was just like record label knew me as a tour guy, and then they knew me as, oh, Tristan's hired a couple buddies, and really trying to make this big pivot to, hey, they trust Cusick Media to get hired. It doesn't have to be Tristan that they communicate with the entire time, because we know that he's built this team and we're hiring the company rather than just the individual.
What was that transition like for you?
Man, that's a good question. I think trial and error too. I think a big part of it for me has been learning which jobs I can fully give away and which jobs I need to be fully present on.
Okay.
Because I've realized more so in music than in commercial world. When an artist or a manager hires you or a label hires you for a music job, a lot of times they want Tristan, and I can let that happen sometimes, not all the time, whether it's budget dependent or creative dependent and stuff like that. And so I think I've lost a few jobs because looking back, it seemed like they wanted more of me and they had more of the team,
Yeah.
and that was just one of those things where I didn't read the room right. And with that said, maybe they weren't the right client anyway with where we're going with the company building. But yeah, I think it's feeling out each job and like the personality of the client and what they're looking for. But the way that we were able to get there, though, was honestly a lot of like candor within the company of, hey, Tristan, you want me to do this, but you won't let me email. You want it to go through you, and it's just like looking back, I was just like, yeah, I was a freaking idiot, dude. Like I was the problem in my company, and so I think it was a lot of just like very kind, very raw conversations that were just like, hey, if you really want this to get where you want it to be as a company, you've got to get out of the way. And then me just swallowing my pride and be like, yeah, you're right. My bad. Okay, let's try this. And then if I mess up and like jump back in again, just like very sweetly, but call me out.
Let me know. Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
man, I relate to this 100%. I suppose first I want to know what failure looks like in your world. Certainly in music, I know what that looks like to get a client and it not go the way you intend it. And there's of course varying degrees of that. But first, can you kind of define what failing at a project would be? The reason I want to answer that is because I then want to know how you handle that internally.
Yeah, I'll try to give an example. So there was a client that we had where we did like a vertical video shoot for them. They got the content back and it just wasn't what they were hoping for. And it's one of those where there's two sides of it. One was just like, hey, I gave you exactly what you were looking for. I gave you the exact deliverables. I told you which locations that we were going to do, but they got it back and just weren't stoked.
Yeah.
And so it got to a point where I was kind of rallying with my team, and there were kind of different sides of the coin of just like, do we just say, hey, dude, like this is what you paid for, period, like X, Y, and Z, like that's just what it is. We described it to you. The other side of it for it was just like, all right, who we are and how we treat people matters a lot more than a couple bucks. And so we got to the point where we were just like, hey, we're sorry. We did everything we said we were going to do, but we don't want to leave anybody with a bad taste in their mouth with our company and our experience. And so we're happy to do a complete reshoot for you at no cost, other than just like booking another location or something to where we aren't going deeper into the red. But we're happy to just completely do a reshoot. I think that would be a potential example of failure within what we do. And I think ultimately it comes back to, in my brain, everything that we're doing is a 20-year move, not a this year move. When we moved to Nashville, my wife and we had kind of talked about it, and it's just like, hey, this feels like a move that's going to be really long. I think early on I was just like, man, I'm going to die in Nashville. And that, while that may very well be the case, I think I'm going to be here for a long time either way. And just trying to get to a place where, hey, we're trying to plant really, really deep roots, whether that's relationships with friends, whether that's business relationships or X, Y, and Z. We want to make sure that we are bringing our best every single time and let people be able to walk away saying, even if it's a poor experience, like, hey, that isn't where we wanted it to go, but they handled that the best.
Right.
And it's been fruitful. Like clients like that, not that that's happened a lot, but there's been a few times where a client's walked away maybe not being the most amped on something, but then the way that we handle an exit, it's a year or two later, they come back and be like, hey, we'd really like to work together again. And so I would say, hopefully that's close to the context of failure that you were kind of alluding to.
Yeah, it does. And that's kind of the question I'm asking is, how do you guys handle when someone's unhappy? Because it happens. Mm-hmm. It's a part of the thing. So I think you answered it exactly. I know firsthand, running a company, what the hours can look like. How do you handle living life around starting a business?
Oh, buddy, I'm still learning, honestly.
Aren't we all?
I think
that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, dude. I think that there's, early on building Cusick Media, I really prided myself in putting in like 14-hour days and thought I was like the bee's knees because of it. I thought the more hours I put in, the more important I was. Looking back now, I was an idiot and really wasting a lot of time. Just thinking that being at my table meant productivity or importance, and that's just not the case at all. And so, honestly, these days, I just consider it like my work schedule is just riding waves. There's seasons where we're in the middle of a 2-week span where last week I had 5 shoots and this week I have 3, which, praise God, like I've always, when you pray for a harvest, don't be mad when it comes, you know? But it's one of those where it's definitely a full season. And I think just like being aware of that and being okay with it. Because there's also seasons where 2 weeks will go by and we'll not make any money, but payrolls still do every 2 weeks. And it's just like, oh gosh, all right, here we go.
Right.
And so I think there was a mentor of mine that had kind of talked to me about this analogy of just like truly a pendulum. Just the pendulum of swinging back and forth. And it's inevitable that it's going to swing back and forth. And the more you can learn to be okay with it and let it swing, the less pain that you're going to be in. And so it's one of those to where I think early on in my career, the pendulum towards work and rest, it would swing up towards work. And I would just try to stand in the way and keep it pushed up towards work and not let it just do its natural swing back. Wow. And I would just get so burnt out and exhausted and just like feeling like this pressure of, I remember early in Nashville, people would ask me, well, what do you do for fun? And I just felt so cool when I would say, man, honestly, I just really love to work. I was just like, you tool, like, shut up. What do you like? You're such a loser. Like,
Right.
and so, dude, honestly, like, just learning to like be okay with the pendulum swing,
Okay.
and I have to remind myself of that often because I think it's very natural for me to get really angsty whenever work's not popping and we're not making an abundance of cash over an extended period of time. And I think the Lord has done a lot for me to just like teach dependence on Him through some difficult seasons, and also just like a surrenderedness of, man, at the end of the day, I really want Cusick Media to work out. I would love for it to be able to make a lot of incredible stories and to make a lot of things that are just like cool looking and inspiring, and to provide income for not only myself, but for my team as well. But at the end of the day, like, if it's not supposed to happen, it's not supposed to happen. I'm going to do what I can with the work of it. And then I'm just going to surrender the rest of it to God because maybe he's having me like be a barista at Crema next week. I don't know. And so learning to live in that surrendered way, I think has lifted a lot of the weight off of my chest when it comes to
Okay.
being able to work and live. But then the other side of that is just like learning to have actual hobbies.
My next
I
question was going to be, what do you do for fun?
Yeah, great question. Smooth transition. I was already going there for you. And I think just like having actual hobbies that make you happy and are completely unrelated to work have been really beautiful. For me, it's become like a lot of like movement and activity.
Okay.
I think I got married at 21 and was a fat piece of crap for like a good 3 years. I would just eat whatever I wanted, barely exercise, really didn't even like going on walks with my wife. I was just a very reclusive man. And looking back, there may have been a little depression or something like that just
Sure.
sprinkled in there. But man, it's something to where it's funny. My wife, last like July or August, we had walked into the Exchange, which is like a running retail store over in East Nashville, and we were talking to a couple people there, and she actually kind of got talked into doing a half marathon for the fall last year. And then she just like got the most excited about it, and I was very closed off to it. But her persistence and peer pressure, I ended up also jumping into kind of this program and training for the half marathon in the fall. And then I just caught the bug, dude.
Yeah.
So running and like movement and activity have become something I've really loved. And then I've just found so much community in it too. I think it's this interesting duality where the intention was pure just to show up and to take care of my body and to do this hefty challenge of running a half marathon. But dude, it became so fruitful for my work as well, very unintentionally. But I walked in, and one of the first people I met inside of the Exchange was one of the founders, and we became buddies. And then I ended up doing work with the Exchange, and then through this running community, have met CEOs and heads of marketing for these different brands, and then I've done work with them, and then I've gotten plugged into different agencies through this running community. And it just came out of this like pure like I just want to show up and run, and then it's just friends who decide to work together rather than this like
Right.
heavy weighted pressure of going out and trying to sell. It was just like, hey dude, do you want to work together? Sure, that sounds fun. Like, what do you want to make? And then these authentic and organic relationships have just flown out of hobbies that genuinely didn't have like a work angle going into it.
What do you say to people who are in the place you were a couple years ago? I'm focused on work right now. I don't have time. This is not a priority of mine. What do you say to that person?
I would say 4 hours of 100% you is better than like 10 hours of 20% you. If you can show up for work and you're fully present, you've taken care of yourself, you're fueled well, you are connected in community, like you yourself are in a really good spot, you will be much more productive in 4 hours than you would at like 10 hours at like a very minimal percentage of yourself where you're tired, you're burnt out, you haven't ate a healthy meal that day, you're dehydrated because you forget to drink water and you're just sipping on coffee and Red Bull and Monster or whatever that your thing is.
Yeah, right.
Just because I've been there, like being a creative who didn't like wasn't aware of my wellness, didn't really take care of myself. I would put in hours and hours and just be so frustrated with myself that I wasn't producing in the way that I really wanted to just like show up and like create. That now, not that I'm any sort of freak athlete, but just like really in a rhythm of trying to be better about taking care of myself. I just feel like when I show up, I'm just so much more present. My creative juices can just start flowing so much quicker. And I'm happier doing it.
Dude, the thing I always think about is there's going to be no more difficult decision in my workday. Let's say I have a tough meeting at 9 a.m. that I'm dreading. That's going to be easier than the decision I make to go train. That's the hardest
Absolutely.
decision of my day. Whatever I'm going on in my work life is just made so much easier. That's not the hardest decision I made that day.
Man, that's 100% it. And I just think like, I fully relate to you where I think discipline is contagious.
Okay.
If you jump into it early and often, then it just becomes a part of who you are rather than anxiety being more of an identity piece for you where you just keep pushing it off and then you keep pushing it off. And then it's this deathly cycle because you push it off, you're more anxious. And because you're anxious, you push it off more. It's just this loop where I think if you're, whether it's going on a run, lifting, a bike training session, jumping into a cold plunge, just continually like telling yourself that you can do difficult things and
Yeah,
like you're
right.
not going to procrastinate. You're just going to jump in and do it. And just once you're in it, you realize it's not that hard,
Right.
but it's just that initial like 100% effort for like 1% of movement is like the hardest part.
Yep.
And so like once you can get over to the other side, I think that that's contagious in knocking out early in the day and then later in the afternoon, whenever you're faced with having to finish a song or having to finish an edit or a client phone call that you're not stoked about,
Yeah.
you just get to a point where your rhythms are just like, I'm just going to call them because then you realize it's really not that scary.
That's such a good analogy. I get asked a lot with training, how do you go and do that every day? For me currently, it's just about 2 workouts 6 days a week. And one of those
Look at you, you
days
freak.
it's
Golly.
crazy right now. A lot of times I get asked, how do you do that every day? How do you make that decision over and over? And I'm like, well, at some point it stops being a decision. It's just what you do. You have the workout in the morning and over lunch break or in the morning and the evening, whatever it may be. You're not making a decision every day to go do it. It's just what you do.
Yeah. It's just such a mindset shift, dude. And when you learn that, like, when you say you're going to do something, that's king rather than your feelings,
Oh, yeah.
that just unlocks like a new thing. Because even for me, I was yesterday was a whirlwind of a day where I started working at 7 and then ended up like being on set from 3 to 9 after basically a normal work day. And I got home at 9 and me and my wife are doing this. We're big challenge people. I
Oh,
wish I was just a guy where it's just like, no, this is just what I do all the time. It's just I need some dumb little challenge to like keep me going in something.
incredible.
And so we're doing, I think we committed to 30 days of running at least 1 mile every day,
Okay.
just to get us out the door. And then it's often like a lot of times where it's just like you say you're going to do a mile and you're out there and you're like, well, I'm already out of
Yeah.
here. I'm gonna just do a couple
We
more.
all know the first mile is the worst mile.
Oh, 100%. My body yells at me the entire time for the first mile. And so last night was one of those times where I got home at 9:30 after a shoot and I super didn't want to, but I tied up my shoes and went out there and I did a mile. Yeah, last night was just a mile. I'll let it be clear. It wasn't one of those where I'm like, man, I'm going to go rip 5. It was like, no, I hit 1 mile and I walked the rest of the way home.
So much respect.
But I think it's one of those where it's just like, it really is. Just do what you say you're going to do. And I think when you are able to kind of get in that zone, in that mode, it just unlocks a lot of freedom for you in your life.
Dude, I know for myself, if I'm not keeping the promises to myself, I'm not keeping them to anybody else. Tell me about how Ruak Run Club started.
Yes. And so for about a year, I was kind of just praying about just clarity and purpose. I think Cusick Media is not going anywhere, but I just feel like there was something in me that felt like there was something else I needed to be doing. I was praying, and there was a day late in January where I was at Breeze Parlor over in East, and I had like 2 hours to kill. And I just kind of started my time. I was just like, God, like, what do you want to show me? Felt led to Genesis 2, open up Genesis 2. And in it, it talks about how God created man and then he breathed life into him. And I don't know why that stood out to me that day. But it was really that out of any way that God could have created, he chose to breathe life into man. So it was that. And then at the same time, over the last, I'd say like 7, 8 months, I've gotten really close with some friends who founded a contrast therapy studio over in East Nashville called Lolu. Where they do breath work, sauna, cold plunge. It's very like connectivity, very community forward. And in some of their classes, they've talked about how the core of our life force is breath. And so those two things kind of collided in my brain. And it just kind of made me think about, okay, cool. So in the wellness world, in the wellness world, breath is really kind of the core of life. And then it's interesting over here where God created life and humanity through breath. And so that kind of just prompted this idea in my brain. It was like, what would it look like to create the intersection of creativity and wellness? I think creative individuals, as being inside of the community myself, being in Nashville, where it's a very creative town, specifically East Nashville, where it's kind of a bigger hub of creative people in general. From what I've noticed is that creative people aren't great at taking care of themselves naturally. I think that there's a few unicorns that have found this 12 workouts a week world, like our boy Dan.
Or we're just
But
crazy.
yeah. It's either nothing or crackhead, one of the two. But I think in the middle of all that, I've just noticed that we don't do a very good job and are not taught very well how to take care of ourselves. And when I say take care of ourselves, yes, we think about like physical exercise, we think about nutrition, but it's also connection and community. I think the beauty of this new world of freelance is autonomy. Don't get me wrong, freaking love it. The ability to be able to take the jobs you want to and not take the jobs you don't want to be able to work from home, to be your own boss. It's a beautiful thing. But with that freedom, the trade-off is fragmentation. I think there's a lot of isolation in creatives, just because we're not all in the office together, working together and all those kind of things. And there's so much individualism that exists right now in the creative world to where I think we really struggle because of that. I knew before I hired my first employees, like I dealt with that a lot. I remember telling the first employee I ever hired, I was like, hey, I'm hiring you because I think you're really talented. I'm also really lonely and want a buddy.
I just want to hang out.
And so I'm paying someone to hang out with me, basically. A real cool guy over here. And so, dude, in the middle of all that, just saw like a real lack for community and connection for creative people, especially to propel them into better levels of wellness. As we talked about earlier, I think whenever you take care of yourself, you're a better version of yourself. And if you can be a better version of yourself, then you make better art and you make better time management choices. And if you're an entrepreneur, like you make better creative decisions on the way that you lead your company and stuff like that. And so ultimately, my intention with Ruak is to propel creatives through wellness by product and experience. That's a very long verbiage line, but the intention is really to create spaces and items to be able to help creatives. And I think a lot of that's going to be through wellness. And so one of the expressions of it is Ruak Run Club. Started that out of just how much I've seen running has helped my life, and the community that you can find in that. And so we did our first event back in June, where we ended up having like 45 creatives come out and run together. And I will say it was a more heavy spread of walkers than runners. I think a lot of run clubs get a bad rap because a lot of people hate running, which is valid. So we had like a walking option and a running option. We did it all at Centennial Park, where it's just one big 1 mile loop. And so people were all like, no matter if you walk or ran, you were by people pretty much the entire time. And we had probably like 60% of the people walked, which was really fun. It was really sweet. And so just seeing stuff like that, for me as a person, I love connecting people. And so being able to like curate a space where all of these people of different creative disciplines are able to come together, whether they're a musician or a photographer or a chef or an entrepreneur, just so many different worlds of people came together and did something that bettered themselves, but also were able to connect and find community with a lot of other really incredible people. And so Ruak Run Club was kind of our initial launch thing. We're going to do that once a month. That will always be free. But then we're just also trying to like ideate and find partnerships in town for different events. And so tonight we're doing our first collaborative event. We're doing it with Lolu, my friends over at the Contrast Therapy Studio in East, where they're going to put on a private class just for us, where we'll have a limited number of seats and people come in, and it'll be a curated class focused on creativity. So it'll be a class of breath work, sauna, and cold plunge, a whole bunch of people doing something that's a really tall task. And a lot of these people have never done cold plunges before. So I'm very excited to hear probably a lot of screams and fun stuff like that. But dude, just trying to create these spaces where it's these unique wellness challenges to help people step into something that they probably wouldn't have done before and find community along the way. And so doing a lot of events like that. There's a couple more that we're kind of ideating on right now, but Run Club will be a core event, a lot of partnerships throughout the town. But eventually I see it also being able to offer like retreats that interdisciplinary creatives of different kinds, whether it's chefs, photographers, videographers, producers, tour, monitor engineers, all different types of creativity to be able to come together and do 15 people at a cabin 2 hours outside of Nashville and do an extended weekend where food's cooked for you and you have guided reflection time where everybody spreads out and has their time in nature, comes back and is able to rally on what they were able to think through, have like runs that are like trail runs or guided breathwork classes, like all of those kind of things curated in a little weekend or maybe eventually a week long thing out in Montana
Yeah, man.
where you really take time to like invest in yourself so that you really just like fill up your cup so that you can really pour it out for everybody else and into your craft for an extended period of time following. So that's an idea. I want to create a mentorship program. I don't think that there's like a really good mentorship program in the creative world. I think a lot of us creatives, like we've talked about, just say yes and then figure it out. But I think it would be really cool to be able to have some sort of really tailored mentorship pairing where young creatives can get paired with older creatives so that they don't have to learn everything themselves. They can learn by other people's failures, which we've also talked about. And just allow older creatives to be able to give back because anytime I've been able to do that, it just really fills up my cup. So that's like kind of the experience side. And then on the other side, it's also developing a product company that I think the main pillar of will be apparel. I've loved fashion for a long time. I almost went to the University of Kentucky to do fashion merchandise. And this just allows me to have an umbrella to do it with a lot of purpose. Starting by making some hats that are built in a structure that I really love, but with performance fabric. Kind of again coming back from creativity and wellness and trying to find the intersection of that and a couple different apparel lines down the road, but that's probably where we'll start. And so long-winded, welcome. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk of
This is
Ruak.
so cool, man. I'm so inspired by this.
It's fun. I mean, it really just, not to get cheesy, but it really does feel like an idea that like was given to me rather than I had, if that makes any sense. It was one of those where genuinely I just feel like God gave me it and it's my job to steward it. Early on in kind of the ideation process, I had told a lot of people and then I was just getting really busy and I backed up. And then a lot of
Sure.
people were just like, hey, dude, when is it starting? And it really was this convicting moment of just like, this feels like a very unique idea. And if I don't steward it, somebody else will get to steward it. And so I just selfishly was like,
Yeah.
well, I got to step up because I want to be the one to be able to like bring this to the world. And so that coming back to the idea of Ruak,
Yeah.
Ruak itself, the name comes from that Hebrew word for breath of life. That's that word in Genesis 2. I'm just spelling it a little differently. Instead of Ruach, it's Ruak.
How are you managing having two things now?
No, I have not figured it out. We are deep in the middle of just trying to figure that out right now. We've got our second event tonight, and then with 5 shoots last week, 3 shoots this week,
Yeah.
it is quite a whirlwind. And so, kind of going back to what we had talked about, it's just like, hey, dude, like ride the wave. Learning that in this season, it's going to be pretty full throttle, but trying to look at my calendar and look at next week, it does seem to be a little bit more mellow. I think it's just like trying to embrace the moment and then sleep as much as you can.
Totally.
So I think it's just, for me at least, trusting my team because I've been blessed with having the team over at Cusick Media to do a lot of the work to kind of safeguard me from a lot of those other tasks. But yeah, very much so. Always feel like I'm in a way dropping balls, and so trying to give myself some grace in this season. But yeah, dude, I think it's when I have time for Ruak, really capitalizing, and when I don't, being caring to myself.
Starting something new is one of the most exciting things. Getting to design a world for it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I just think it's such a space for storytelling. I think for me, I get so excited because for years I've just made things for other people and have been able to put 10% of Tristan into other people's projects. Where with Ruak, it really feels just like an outpouring of things that I think matter. Selfishly, ownership. This is the first thing I've ever owned that we've made. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so I think being able to have that and also just the ability to tell important stories and help impact people. I think for me, there's a bit of an extra drive when it comes to creating Ruak because it's not only just telling stories that really matter, but it's also just like feeling like you're actually impacting people and not saying influencing people as if we're influencers per se, but I think just like really making impact to be able to hopefully encourage somebody that hasn't ran in a year to be able to see Ruak Run Club as an option where they can bump into like a couple different other creative people and not feel like they're alone jumping into something. Or if it's going to Lolu for the first time and experiencing cold plunge and sauna and challenging themselves, like just inviting people a little bit deeper into their wellness and into bettering themselves and a better version of the creative that they are. I think that gives me that extra fuel to where sometimes there's a couple late nights, but it feels like it's worth it.
You've got such a cool idea there, and I love that it's not just let's see how hard we can push this thing and it's real macho, and I love all that
Yeah.
stuff and big A type alpha energy, but it's actually like, hey, let's just see if we can bring some people with us.
The intention really is just to be able to help people take that next step or to encourage people deeper into the waters. I think it's one of those where if you're at 10 out of 100, let us bring you to 11. Or if you're at 92 out of 100, let's get you to 93. I think just creating inspiration and community and opportunity to be able to go a little bit deeper. And so whether you're the guy at Run Club who's going to be our mileage leader at the high end of encouraged loop is like 5 miles.
Okay.
If you want to run 5 miles, a 6 minute mile, buddy, you got it. Or if you're a person who this is the first time you went on a walk in 3 years, you can walk with a group of
Yeah.
people too. And so I think just like trying to create a space for a lot of people to connect and commune, but like have a very inclusive way to do that. Don't get me wrong, I'm going to train really hard and I'm going to push myself really hard. I'm going to run my first marathon this fall
Let's
for
go,
Indianapolis.
man.
And I've got for myself a fairly lofty goal for it. And so I'm going to train really hard, but that doesn't mean that like the rest of the world has to do all of these dumb things that I put myself through.
Tell me what your current training schedule looks like.
Great question. So I train a lot with the Exchange, which is a running retailer over in East Nashville. They've got like a program or a membership that you can jump in on, and there's a lot of other like perks that you get for it. But my biggest thing is kind of like the training schedule. And so right now we're in the summer block that they've called like speed block or different things like that, to where a lot of people train for an event that happened on Saturday with Nike that I got to shoot, which was the longest day of the year, fastest mile of your life. And so it's basically like this adult track day.
So cool.
To where people were going out there and trying to PR their mile, which was so gnarly. And then there's the Tomato Fest 5K that's coming up. That's like a big thing in East Nashville that I'll probably try to go out there and haul and try to rip. But then it'll be coming up. We'll hit this fall block where I'm going to really start stacking mileage for the Indianapolis Marathon that it seems that a lot of the Exchanges program is training for. I think there's like 50 people that are going to be going to Indianapolis to race that. And so right now, mileage weekly is somewhere in like the 20s.
Okay.
Doing Wednesday, we do track workouts. And so whether that's 6 a.m. or 6 p.m., the Exchange has options to be able to do that over at Rose Park. And it's a blast putting in bigger efforts of like 800s or 1Ks or 2Ks and stuff like that, which, I mean, just bring me back to like high school training, which is really fun, really exerting yourself because I played football and not long distance running. And so long distance is quite a new challenge for me. But then there's like long runs are on the Saturdays, and then in between just trying to pick up really easy miles, whether that's a 4 miler on Monday, a 2 miler on Wednesday, and just kind of stacking. But the big part for me is just like maintaining lifting as a part of that. I really fell apart on that midway through the block last in the spring, and my body started falling apart. I got shin splints, my ankles were really giving out on me. And so I think for me, it's just like trying to do my best to run 5 days a week, which right now in this challenge, we're doing it every day. But the intention is like, if I can run 5 days a week and lift 4 to 5 days a week, that's a really optimal spot for where I'm at.
Oh man, so cool. So it's 5 days a week you're lifting?
I try to.
What's the split with that?
Right now it's typically like a legs on Monday after like a 4 mile easy run. Tuesday's typically upper body. Wednesday I let myself off typically because it's a really stressful track workout in the morning.
Yep.
Thursday is another kind of upper body with what I would say is like more secondary muscles and lower like legs, kind of like more so calf stuff, hip stuff, rather than like a more aggressive like big squats and stuff like that. Friday is another kind of all around kind of upper body day. And then if I'm able to squeeze in like a Sunday kind of just like mobility lift, that's kind of flow for right now.
Lifting has taken a big backseat with, I just don't have time to recover. I've gone down to 2 days a week and it's hard to let that go. Body just feels different. It looks different. And just aesthetically, it's been hard for me to let that go.
Yeah. Dude, it's one of those where it's also just like learning how much recovery matters. I think I neglected it really hard, like whether it was after a long run, literally just like going from there to go eat, or whether it was right before a track workout, literally just dropping my gear and just starting to run. I learned I can't do that. I'm 28, but I feel like I'm 50.
Yeah.
My body is
Yeah, same.
old, much old. Like a lot of people are like, yeah, I'm like 30, but like my physical age, that whether it's Whoop or whoever gave me, is like 22, and I'm like, man,
I'm
I don't want to
not.
know my score,
Yeah.
honestly.
So we used to all play basketball together, some context.
Mhm,
And I know for me now, because of triathlon, I can move forward. That's
mhm.
it. There's nothing side to side, or I'm in so much trouble.
Your body adapts real fast to stuff, and if your just whole thing is running straight for an extended period of time, you get gassed real quick if you're not doing also track work and stuff like that.
I'll be the first to admit I'm so bad about stretching or even I've gotten better at recovery and I definitely prioritize sleep, but there's some like recovery practices that I could be
Mhm.
much better about that I would see benefit from, but sometimes I just don't have the bandwidth.
Dude, it's hard, man. I mean, it really does become like a part-time job. And you
Definitely.
don't want it to become a job because it's a hobby, but there's times where I'm like, geez, dude, like
Yeah.
I mean, I just want to just sit at home and be a fat little turd for a little bit and enjoy my life. But I think whenever you surround yourself in community, at least, that's what makes the additional hours of exercise better, because if I go on a 4 mile run and a lift, me and my buddy Shirag have just like made that like a ritual for ourselves. When if I'm not on a shoot on Mondays, we'll go do that in the afternoon, where we'll go hit a 4 miler and we'll go to like East Park and get a lift
So
in.
cool.
And that feels like, oh, okay, I'm catching up with my homies at the same time as I'm doing this thing that is a non-negotiable in my schedule. I think for me, training in isolation is really hard. I just hate running by myself. I think some people love it and just are able to think and process or listen to audiobooks. I'm just like, dude, like I just want to be with somebody else so I can forget the pain that I'm putting myself through, and just to like make it feel like I'm doing like extra productive by like getting a good hang in at the same time as getting some exercise in.
How often do you feel like you're, man, I can't wait to get out today versus I do not want to do this at all today?
Yeah, that's a good question, dude. I would still say I'm like 70-30. 70% of the time it's just like, golly, I don't want to do this. But then there's the rare days where I'm like, you know what? I'm ready to get moving a little bit. It really is just one of those things where it's similar to what we were talking about earlier. It's that first, it's the 1% of just like tying up your shoes. That's always the hardest part for me. I think it's one of those where I think for a long time, similar, like whether it's like reading scripture or anything like that, so much of my life was waiting for the emotion or the inspiration to go and do the task, but just learning that if you can just go do the task, all of the passion and the excitement and the inspiration comes on the back end. I think for a long time, especially in our culture, it's like, hey, wait around until you get really excited about something and then do it. But it's just, in my life at least, it's really finding value in that the joy comes on the backside of the work rather than the joy leading me into work, if that makes any sense.
Man, I've loved this conversation so much. This has been so fun. Will you tell us when the next run club is meeting?
Yes. So next run club is July 20th. We're still figuring out time, but it'll be in the late afternoon so that it's not a billion degrees outside like it is right now. So July 20th, it'll be at Centennial Park. We'll have a 2 mile walk option for our non-runners. And then a 3 to 5 mile run option. Last time we had like a little happy hour hang afterwards, which we're going to try to coordinate as well. We had Walker Brothers Kombucha sponsor it, and so everybody could hang and drink Walker Brothers on some picnic blankets by the Parthenon. And so that's the intention again, is to try to get a sponsor for that, because it's one of those where you're kind of sitting on some of those runner high or walker high, whichever pursuit you do. And then are just able to hang out and find some community. And so July 20th will be the next Ruak Run Club event. And then if you want to check out anything more about Ruak, go to our Instagram. It's Ruak Co, RUAKCO, to just see more of the stories we're telling, some of the events coming up, and all of the world of Ruak that's very slowly but eventually being built.